Tonight on America's Dumbest Criminals, a home exterminator who will rid your house of valuable possessions. A surveillance camera catches a burglar breaking and entering. And a criminal who got the shaft long before he faced a judge. Stick around and see justice served as we go on patrol for America's Dumbest Criminals.
Delta 1566. Give me a call on your primary.
Now, welcome your host for America's Dumbest Criminals, Daniel Butler and Debbie Allen.
What sort of pests bother you the most? Huh?
You mean besides you?
No, yeah, like
Just joking.
Just like bugs, right?
Okay, I pretty much hate all kinds of bugs. That's true.
Really?
Yeah.
See, now I sort of figured you would have empathized with other little creatures, you know?
Oh, I deserve that.
Bambi,
Very funny.
Bambi, Thumper,
No,
roaches.
bugs. Not bugs.
All right, so if your house was crawling with critters, what?
I'd have the house so full of chemicals, it'd probably look like Chernobyl.
Wow, okay. All right, bug-free at any price? I guess.
Absolutely.
Well, there are some amazing hidden costs when one particular exterminator visited your home, and a hidden camera caught it all.
Police have a saying that if it wasn't for the dumb criminal, well, we couldn't catch anybody. But like with this story, this guy's been doing this a long time, and I think he just got real complacent, real laid back. And, I think the dumbness overtook him. This man has an exterminating company. He's a very personal guy, and he has a lot of customers. And a lot of people would leave a key for him, and he would go in and do his exterminating. One particular man lived on the beach side. We kept noticing things missing, money missing off of his desk, some videos, and he pretty well suspected this guy, so he set up a hidden video under some laundry in his bedroom. That morning, Jeff comes in. And he comes in the bedroom where the camera is. Obviously, he's looking around, and he goes over to the dresser, as you see, and there's big glass jugs full of coins. Reaches in, takes coins out, put them in his pocket, and he would take the mug and he would shake it like he was going to fluff up the coins or some way make it look like he hadn't been there. And when I brought Jeff in for an interview, we asked him if he ever looked through drawers and all. Oh, no, of course not. I asked him if he took anything. He started, I guess, catching on a little bit, and he said, well, I might have taken some lunch money. I didn't have any lunch money that day. And he said, okay, you got me here. And then he decided he didn't want to talk about this anymore.
Okay, just as that community breathed a little easier with the exterminator's crime spree eradicated, we've got the story of a crook who wanted to rid his conscience of all manner of vermin. Watch as this bad guy rats on himself.
A couple of weeks ago, I was checking on a stolen motorcycle case, and I went to the south side of town. And I was driving through the neighborhood looking for the motorcycle. I saw these two guys standing in front of a vehicle inside of this yard. I didn't think anything about it. Matter of fact, when I passed by, I waved at them, and one waved back at me. As I continued through the neighborhood, I went back around that block again. The same two guys were there. And when I passed by the guys this time, they went off in separate directions and still didn't think anything about it because that's not unusual around here. So I continued to look through the neighborhood for this motorcycle. I came back around the area for the third time, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and I saw one of the guys waving his hand, motioning. Well, I thought he was flagging me down. You know, something had happened. He needs some help. So I turned around in the roadway and approached him. Hey, tell me what's going on, man? Well, this guy had his face just turned just pure shock on him, and he told me, he said, I knew you were gonna get me. I knew you were gonna get me. And I had no earthly idea what this guy was talking about. Then he told me, he asked me, how did you know it? How'd you know I did it? And I still had no idea what he was talking about, but I told him, I said, you know, We're paid to know these things. That's what we do for a living. So after that, he broke down and started confessing of how he broke into this lady's house, pushed her down, took her pocketbook, ran out the front door, and jumped in a car and took off. Well, I was shocked. I could not believe that this guy was confessing a crime that I had no idea about. Nothing had been reported to any of our agents about it. And I told him, I said, well, look, I said, tell me where the pocketbook's at. I know if you're lying or not, so don't lie to me. Well, this guy said, well, you know it's in the floorboard of that car. He said, you know it is. So I take him back to the car where he was standing at, and I looked through the window of the car, and sure enough, there's a pocketbook in the floorboard. And I was thinking, man, I could not believe this guy. This guy, he is stupid, pure stupid. And not only was this guy charged with several felonies and arrested, but he also flagged me down just to carry him to jail.
I'm Lieutenant Barry Schrum of the Ocala Police Department. As department spokesman here in Ocala, Florida, it's my duty to report the news. Sometimes it's good news, sometimes it's bad news, and every now and then it's very unusual news. And a few months ago, the Denny's restaurant here in Ocala was robbed by a robber that chose a different style of, let's say, undercover attire to do this robbery. And then it was my job to report this to the news.
Every morning I call Lieutenant Schrum doing beat checks and ask him what's going on in the news, what happened overnight. Barry said no money was taken and no one was injured, so I passed up the story and said I wasn't that interested. He pulled me back and said, I think this is one you're probably going to be interested in. This suspect, Ann, went into the store only wearing underwear.
This robber chose to put boxer shorts on his head.
So of course that caught my interest.
One of the first questions the reporters asked me was, could witnesses identify it? And that was quite unusual. I had no answer for that question. The second question was, how large was his weapon?
That was just too good to pass up. I went to cover the story over at Denny's, and it was fun walking into the restaurant because a lot of times when you approach a crime scene, it's really shaky. A lot of people don't want to talk. They still didn't want to talk, but they all had smirks on their faces. The suspect walked into the store and carrying not a typical weapon, he was armed with a wine bottle. It was a full wine bottle, so he went up to the cash register and held it up and said, I want the money from the cash register, and everyone was freaked out by what he wasn't wearing. So they ran to the back and he broke the wine bottle to try to threaten him and splashed wine all over the ceiling, and then he tried to bust open the cash register but was unable to get any money whatsoever.
Once again, the suspect, he had a blue shirt on, that was usual. The suspect wore his boxer shorts on his head instead of his bottom. And that, to this point, is the bare facts of the infamous robbery at Denny's in Ocala, Florida.
You remember how Otis on the Andy Griffith Show used to periodically stagger over to the jail and lock himself up? Well, we found a driver who added a contemporary twist to that form of self-arrest. See for yourself.
Several years ago, when our department built its new building, we had a new concept that was built into it, that of a drive-through service window for people to come up. This featured 2 pneumatic tubes and, of course, an intercom system, allowed people to come up and conduct business within the police department without having to get out of their car, much like a bank service. We'd only been in this building about 30 days when myself and another officer were standing in our parking lot, saw a car pull up under the canopy, individual sitting there, and he pulled back and forth several times under the canopy as if he was having some type of difficulty. I told the officer I was out there with to check with the man, see if he was having some problems or something we could help him with. The officer stepped over there, and I stepped back inside the building. About a minute later, the officer called me and stated he was going to need a breathalyzer operator. Turned out this man at 10 o'clock in the morning thought he was at a bank and was arrested by our officers, charged with driving while impaired, and checked a .18 on the breathalyzer. He told us during the course of the arrest that he was simply trying to get his payroll check cashed and couldn't make anyone on the other end of the intercom understand what he wanted.
Here at America's Dumbest Criminals, we hear unbelievable stories about the odd things that people steal. Snakes, underwear, dog biscuits, commodes, even cockatoo eggs. But frankly, we think this object of desire pretty much scrapes the bottom of the barrel.
There are people who will steal anything, and I think this goes to that.
And what was the loot of choice? Used grease, the unhealthy stuff used in healthy amounts by restaurants.
Our investigators followed them to over 30 places where they attempted to actually get grease. We know that they actually got grease at about 20 locations.
This man was charged with siphoning off 7,400 pounds of used grease, which is sold to used grease dealers for 14 cents a pound to be used in lotions, soaps, and cosmetics. Although he was clearly the fat daddy, he had help in his oily deeds.
I didn't know I was stealing used grease. I was offered a job, you know, to make some extra money, and come to find out, it was illegal. I had no clue.
You know, the song says that grease is the word. Well, here in this slippery state, grease grabbing is a felony.
It's one of the slickest operations I have ever seen.
Yuck. Well, now we go from a pretty slippery subject to a criminal who wished he could move like greased lightning. Daniel?
Yeah. Well, this crook's particular pratfalls required the response of a veritable army of civil servants. Let's report in at Command Central.
It's not all that unusual for police officers to respond to a stick-up at a convenience store. But here in San Antonio, they found a crook stuck up an exhaust vent. Perhaps he thought that if Santa Claus could slide down the chimney, that he'd have no trouble dropping in to pick up a few items after hours. But he was wrong. Real wrong.
All the onions on that burger.
It took hours of plotting, planning, prying, pawing, pushing, pulling, and standing around before firefighters were able to disassemble the exhaust and free the exhausted man. So they could immediately put him in handcuffs and haul him away. And so ends the caper of this fly-by-night operator.
In my 10 years of buying drugs on the street and making cocaine arrests, on one particular occasion, we took an undercover police officer. We had a hard time getting into this location, so we wanted to boost it up a little bit. Instead of buying a $10 amount or a $20 amount of crack cocaine, we decided to send this undercover officer out with a new $50 bill. Crisp, pretty, ready to go buy some cocaine. The undercover officer got out there and presented the $50 bill for a $50 amount of cocaine. They did not want to accept this as U.S. currency.
Let me see it a bit real, dog. You wouldn't game it like that with me. On what? I need 50 to go have some business with you all.
They felt that the $50 bill was not real. They wasn't familiar. They hadn't seen one of the new 50s yet. So all my drug dealers got together on the street corner and had a roundtable discussion, holding it up, looking for the strip in it, looking at the serial numbers, debating back and forth with the undercover officer, and finally he convinced them that it was a real $50 bill. The trade actually for the $50 and the cocaine took place, and they were eventually arrested for sale of crack cocaine within 1,000 feet of a public school.
And now for the news that collects lint in the belly button of the world, here's Daniel with ADC Headlines.
All of us have days when we do almost anything to avoid working. But how far would you take it? A man in Buffalo Grove, Illinois, called in 3 bomb threats to Highland Park school gyms, causing the buildings to be evacuated and searched. When police tracked down the culprit, he admitted to the hoaxes, saying that he could no longer handle the pressures of coaching junior high basketball. It's like the NBA. Try to follow me on this one now, okay? A perpetrator of a series of daring Dunkin' Donut robberies met the demise of his dastardly deeds when doubling back to do the deed again at the first Dunkin' Donut he robbed. His name? Douglas Duncan. But he claims the kidnapping with the accomplice's name, Howard Johnson. Obviously, the all-you-can-eat plan didn't work out. A woman was trying on a bathing suit in the dressing room of a Southern California department store when she saw something horrifying. No, it wasn't celluloid or mismatched tan wire. It was a man's leg which came crashing into the ceiling. Realizing that he really put his foot in it this time, the man, security guard for the store, confessed on the spot and was arrested on a misdemeanor count of disorderly conduct that specifically pertains to, quote, someone looking through a hole or opening into a bathroom, dressing room, tanning booth, or other area where a person has a reasonable expectation of privacy. No word on whether the woman thought the swimsuit made her look slimmer. That's all for this edition of ADC Headlines. Over to you, Debbie.
Hey, Dan, there's probably a federal guide somewhere that spells out safe handling practices for handling a 500-pound safe. We're pretty sure what you're about to see violates these guidelines.
When you think of safe cracking, you normally think of some nimble-fingered crook listening intently for tumblers to fall. Well, these guys get the fall part right, but don't do so well with the cracking. At least not until they push this convenience store safe over a wall to get their haul of cash. They're forced to haul off the safe, which is recovered when the men are captured. But there were telltale signs of trouble early on. Okay, right here, keep an eye on that guy's pants. Oops. I mean, if a man can't keep his pants up, how's he ever gonna make it in this world?
Okay, 2 wrongs don't make a right, but 5 or 6 bad calls can land you in a local judge's yard with police hot on your tail. That's the clumsy conclusion to this story, but let's go back to the beginning to catch this criminal in all his befuddled glory.
I've been here 23 years. Out of that 23 years, I think this is the funniest thing that's ever happened. On December the 5th, 1997, I was at that red light right there, coming this way, when the alarm sounded in this bank. We've never had a bank robbery in Jasper. I wasn't expecting it to be a bank robbery. Looked inside, I knew everybody in there except for a woman that was dressed in a funny green suit. And as I pulled up and parked, the lady come walking out the front, looked at me, was real nervous. I pointed at her, tried to stop her. She broke and ran across the road over into the judge's yard. When we busted through the hedge, I tackled her. 2 things happened. 1, money went flying everywhere. Number 2, when she lost her hat, I realized I tackled a man, not a woman. During the scuffle, he broke loose from me and ran. I decided to stay with the money instead of giving chase because I knew there was plenty of backup around me. This man was having a really bad day. I tackled him across the street from the bank in Circuit Judge John Peach's yard. He almost got ran over by the police car, threw his clothes down right here, and the bloodhounds tracked him right to this apartment. When they entered and arrested him, he was under the covers trying to hide, making out like he belonged in the apartment, that he was just sleeping. When they come dragging him out, that was one sad-looking boy. He had had a bad day and got caught with it.
They say that ignorance is bliss. In the case we're about to examine, though, ignorance was a blast.
This week's edition of We're Not Making This Up finds a low-watt thief trying a high-caliber approach to auto repair. Only the crook is firing blanks in this story.
We received a call from a local hospital that a subject had suffered from a minor gunshot wound. Subject who was having trouble with his vehicle had replaced a fuse with a .22 caliber bullet, thinking that would make continuity between the circuits and make the truck work. It overheated and a round went off and struck him in the lower leg. And he learned a very valuable lesson about electronics at that time, I would suppose.
I wouldn't have known that.
See?
I wouldn't have known that
It
either.
happened to you, too. Well, I think we'll go out with our criminals' blaze of glory, but next week, we'll fire up a whole new batch of stories here on ADC.
If you've got a lead on a story or just can't wait till next week for more state-of-the-art stupidity, visit our website at www.dumbcrimes.com.
We want to thank you for joining us and extend our gratitude to the law enforcement officers who make this show possible. Every day, they lay their lives on the line to keep us safe from the stupidity of would-be criminals.
As always, we hope we've all learned from others' mistakes.
Hey, but if you haven't, we just might see you next week on America's Dumbest Criminals.
Goodbye, you guys.